We'll prepare for our next session. And we will have this session, we're getting started a bit late, but we will go a full hour until 10 minutes past 12. And I am extremely pleased. I think that students have been the stars of the conference, and we have just learned an enormous amount from our student participants. This panel is entirely of students and student organizations talking about their work on campus and what they are doing. So each of them is going to tell us something about themselves and the work that their group does. And it is moderated by Adam Walwork. And I ran into Adam last evening at dinner. And Adam let me know that he was coming from Albany, where literally within the last few hours he has been sworn into the bar. So there is indeed life after law school, and this young man is what it looks like. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm not actually finished with law school, since I am finishing up a one-year post-JD program in tax law at New York University, but that's not all that important. I'm 28 years old. I've been in academia all my life, so I know quite a bit about dealing with mental illness and recovery and sobriety in an academic setting. The only exception to being in academia all my life was 1 year when, like Professor Sachs, my mental illness combined with my first-year memo project at the University of Chicago Law School forced me to take some time off. When I returned to law school, I started 2 student organizations related to my personal struggles with mental illness and alcoholism, for which I celebrated my 7th year of sobriety last month. Thank you. One organization was successful and the other was not. And I would like to explore why and perhaps get some contribution from our wonderful group of panelists. But they can also talk about their own organizations and other issues. The first organization was the Disability Law Society at the University of Chicago, which still exists. Its primary goal was to bring speakers to campus and to foster debate on issues related to mental illness and also physical disabilities. We held a number of lectures on a wide variety of topics, many of which have actually been covered by the Sachs Institute, including the criminalization of mental illness, discrimination against people with mental illness, and last year around this time, we also had a discussion on the Newtown Massacre. When I left the University of Chicago Law School, I easily found other students to carry on the project, and it continues to thrive today. The second organization was simply a chapter of Alcoholics Anonymous that I tried to start at the University of Chicago Law School. I knew from the dean of students there that there were other students who were struggling with alcoholism. I got approval for the organization. I publicized it on the student website, and also through a mass email. I broke my anonymity, just as I'm doing today. And I waited week after week in the location that I publicized for students to come, and no one ever showed up. So what was the difference between these two organizations? Well, they obviously had very different purposes. One was to kind of talk about mental and physical disabilities. And a number of the participants in the group were people who had mental illness or who had family members who had mental illness. But the Alcoholics Anonymous group required a much deeper identification with a particular disability, with a particular problem, and required one to identify oneself within a community of one's peers. And I think that that was a large part of the reason why no one ever showed up to that group. It's difficult enough to identify oneself within an anonymous group. It's even more difficult, I think, to identify oneself within a 200-person class or something that one where one is apart and sees people every day. And so, I just want, I'm going to introduce our distinguished panel in a second, but one of the things that I want them to sort of talk about and respond to is what are some common challenges that your organizations face in reaching students with mental illness? How have your experiences shaped your work on behalf of student organizations for individuals with mental illness? And finally, how can educational administrators and school counselors contribute to the overarching goal of all your organizations, which seem to me to be reducing the stigma of mental illness, which is obviously something that people with mental illness struggle with every day, and I believe was at least a factor in contributing to the sort of failure of the second student organization that I tried to start. So we have four organizations represented here today. The first is Active Minds with Kirian, who's a senior biology student at the California Institute of Technology. We have a representative here from the American Bar Association Student Organization, Rick Ma, who's a second-year law student at Whittier Law School and is the Ninth Circuit governor, which I recently learned works on behalf of law students with mental illness and advocates on their behalf for students in Southern California and also Hawaii. We have two students from Free Minds. They are co-founders Danny Lee and Patra Childress, both of whom founded the organization here at USC and are working to attain nonprofit status for their organization and to extend it beyond USC to other colleges and universities. And finally, the Lived Experience Research Network is represented here by Timothy Kelly, who is a PhD candidate at the University of Iowa, and Becky Child, who is a PhD candidate at Portland State University and who is the project coordinator for the group's Discrimination in Higher Education project. So again, the sort of three questions that I was hoping that you could all address to some extent are common challenges reaching students with disabilities, how your own experiences have shaped your work and your organizations, and also how educational administrators, safety officials, and school counselors can contribute to the general goal of reducing the stigmatization of mental illness. So I'll start with you, Kiri.
Okay. So I'm from Caltech, and I'm leading a chapter of Active Minds at my school. And so one of our challenges and strategies when it comes to reaching students.
Can everyone hear?
Just speak up.
Okay, so one of the common challenges of reaching students with mental illness is that we really don't know like who's at risk or who might be suffering right now. So as a mental health advocate and as part of Active Minds, our strategy really has been kind of establishing presence on our campus through having fun events where people will come and be interested in what our organization is about, so that they'll approach us and keep on ask more questions as to what kind of work we do. So one of the things that we organized was something called Gratitude Day. It was an event where we had people could come up and write thank you cards to anyone on campus. But on our table, we also had brochures and resources that were related to the Caltech Counseling Center. So this was like an example of where we established the presence of our student organization, but also had a lot of campus momentum and a lot of interest that sparked on campus across, professors, students, anyone on campus. So after that event, when you said Active Minds, people knew people were curious what Active Minds was, and they wanted to know more about it. Also, if there were students who perhaps were needed resources, this was an opportunity for them to learn that there is a counseling center, and there is a group of students who are very supportive of this kind of work and in mental health services. Should I answer all the other two questions?
Sure.
Or do you want me to?
No. You should answer all. Okay. Everyone should answer all of the questions, and then we'll have a general question and answer session at the end. I should have clarified that.
How I personally got involved in the organization was actually during my sophomore year at Caltech, I had one of my classmates had actually committed suicide, and I knew her. I wasn't particularly close with her, but I knew of her, and I've definitely talked to her before. And after I heard that she had passed away, I didn't feel necessarily guilty, but I was very curious, and I wanted to educate myself further on like why would she have gone through this suicide, because she was just a classmate, just another student just like me. So I wanted to learn more about, and I wanted to learn if there were other students who might be going through the same thing at the same time. I wanted to be supportive, so that's how I got involved with Active Minds. Being involved in Active Minds has meant a lot to me personally, because it's one thing to be just interested, have an interest by myself, but to be involved in an organization where I can connect with other students, not just on my campus, but across the nation. I've been able to meet students at USC, UCLA, MIT, or Emory. All these students, they're all doing similar work at their campuses, and we're all influenced. We all have different motivations and how we got involved in the first place. But when I meet with them and talk to them, we all face similar challenges on our campus. For one, it's sometimes hard to reach students. So as we collaborate, I think it just made me realize there's so many people, students, people who might be going through mental illnesses that have the same vision and like the motivation, and it just was a driving force for me to continue be an advocate and spread the message on our campus.
Okay. So the next organization is the American Bar Association Student Organization.
Okay. Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Rick Ma, and I'm the 9th Circuit Governor for the American Bar Association and a second-year law school student at Whittier Law School. I'm here on behalf of the ABA to talk about mental health illnesses because, like the legal profession and law school students in general, we don't like talking about mental health issues. So why is that? Well, Professor Larry Krieger from Florida State University said it best. The theme with law school students is consistent. You must work very, very hard. You must achieve high scores. You must impress your peers, your people, your facilities, your professors, and you must get a great job and generally be successful. With such high expectations, it's no wonder that law school students are sad everywhere, to put it simply. And with the stigma behind depression, anxiety, mental illnesses, law school students are trapped to deal with any problems on their own. Depression among law school students before law school starts is only to 8 to 9%. It jumps to 27% after just one semester, 34% after 2 semesters, and 40% after 3 years. I remember the first time actually meeting up with a group of friends after my first year, and somehow the topic of our student IDs came up. And my friend commented on how happy I used to look and how mature I got. I thought it was a compliment, so I thanked her. And I said, yeah, I actually think I did grow a lot. And she was like, actually, no, I meant you look really old now. So with friends like that, it's easy to see why law school students are depressed everywhere. Unfortunately, it doesn't get any better after law school. We're entering a field where there are as many jokes about lawyers than there are lawyers. We're one of the least liked professions, and we don't even like ourselves. Only half the lawyers out there are satisfied with their work. We have the highest rates of depression. We're ranked actually 4th now in suicide. I found this out last night. And many turn to substance abuse to deal with overwhelming stress. And you might be wondering why the legal field is so stressful. Well, law school attracts a lot of type A personalities. We're high achievers, and once we enter law school, this is the norm. Everybody wants to be in the top 10%, but simple math shows that 90% of those people can't be in the top 10%. So when we become lawyers, we entered into this adversarial system where there are always winners and losers, and you can't always be the winner. With this competition, this sink or swim attitude, it creates this atmosphere of stress and anxiety that stays with us throughout our entire legal career. While it may have painted a kind of bleak picture for law school students and the legal profession as a whole, there is help available. The ABA has passed the Mental Health Initiative in 2007 to help law school students to analyze and recognize the signs of anxiety, stress, and mental illnesses, to destigmatize it. And I myself actually went through a bout of depression and large amounts of anxiety my first year. Not because of the picture, but because of other reasons. But thankfully, I had people to turn to. I had met a person during an ABA annual meeting from the New Jersey California's assistance program, lawyer's assistance program, excuse me. And this is a program that's available in every state, including California. And after a small conversation, she handed me her card and said that if I ever wanted someone to talk to, that I was free to call her at any time. So after an internal debate, because I was afraid that this call might somehow leak back home because people might find out I have a mental illness or I'm depressed or something along those lines, I was afraid to call her. But at the end of the day, I did, and I was extremely glad. And the most important thing that she told me was the fact that I'm not alone. Law school students everywhere are suffering from depression and anxiety and mental illnesses. But the thing was, for me, I kept all those emotions bottled up inside because I was afraid. I thought I was the only one suffering from that problem. But then I realized that the moment I had a chance to open up to a complete stranger, and now I'm talking to you guys about my issues as well, that this is the first opportunity to be free, to finally talk about what we've been aching to talk about. So I'm here, that's why I'm here today, to talk about depression and anxiety and mental illnesses on behalf of law school students everywhere, because to let them know that they actually know we are not alone. Thank you.
Good. The next organization is Free Minds. We have 2 speakers, Danny Lee and Patrick Childress.
Hi, I'm Patrick Childress. I got started with this organization with Danny in spring 2012, and we're both pre-med students, so similar to law students, there's a lot of anxiety and stress, and you see that mental health really is an issue, and you see it everywhere around you. And as a future healthcare provider, I realized that I'm not very informed about the issues of mental health, and I think that since there's really no health without mental health, I took it upon myself to make myself more educated because the issues are so severe. And the way we decided to approach this was, rather than focus solely on the clinical perspective, I mean, I'd heard about DSM criteria and how do you categorize and diagnose mentally ill people. I thought that it would be useful to get the individualized perspective, because while there are guidelines and criteria, I don't know how much that takes into account the individualized experience. So from our perspective, we found it useful to try to reach out to students as much as possible to get their individual stories. So our tactic was anonymity, and we have a website that we put up where we collect submissions, artistic submissions, to let people be as creative and as expressive as possible, as to show their illness or their experience as they want it to be seen. So hopefully we can be more understanding from a more personal level rather than from a diagnostic criteria level. And interestingly, we found that people really gravitated toward that. A lot of them didn't want to be anonymous, and so I think that it's very helpful to put a face to each condition and make it more relatable. It'll hopefully give more people a voice, and hopefully that will make more people want to speak out. And on our campus, we've worked with the Student Counseling Center to try to reach more students, so that they know that there's this other resource and there's a group of people and that they're not alone and that we do have a community. So Danny can talk more about his experience.
Hi everyone, I'm Danny. So I'm the other president of Free Minds. So for me, Free Minds has a very deep meaning for me. Actually, during a semester in college, I was very depressed and and I was overwhelmed by the stress around me. But I was able to reach out to the counseling center, and I found therapy there very helpful. But the surrounding culture around me prevented me from recovering to the fullest extent. I was in a job where expressing my condition wasn't conducive and wasn't appropriate. And I was with a group of people who had a very strong-minded way of looking at things, that you can't show any weakness whatsoever. And my family too, like my mom keeps telling me, our family has never had a history of depression. If you're going to be the first one, like, don't even talk to me. So really it wasn't that I wasn't able to reach the resources. It was just the people that I care about the most couldn't understand or relate to my condition. And because of that, my condition worsened to the point where I felt suicidal at one point. But luckily, I was able to overcome the deepest pits of despair and find meaning through my struggles by working with Patra to find Free Minds. So in spring of 2012, we founded USC's premier mental health student organization. And a lot of what we do is trying to give students a voice and forum to express their stories in a welcoming and open environment where people don't judge and where there's no stigma and there's no sense that you're being weak in expressing your illness. In fact, I did a webcam monologue for our Make It You project that Patrick was telling you about, where I was able to tell my complete story from start to finish. And I got a number of positive feedback from a lot of my friends who originally told me that that it's not okay to express an illness. So I've come to realize that people are more sympathetic than they appear to be, even though they tell you that otherwise in the beginning. And over the years, my parents have been more aware of my condition, and they've been more supportive of my needs. So it's been a blessing that I've been part of this organization from the start. So one of the big things we've done is to get the campus involved in the discussion on mental illness. Because a lot of times we feel that there's not a direct way to communicate with administrators on topics like mental illness, depression, anxiety, or stress, for that matter. So in October, we put on a large panel discussion in the grand ballroom. So it's very similar to the setup, but this is obviously fancier. So, Yeah, we actually have a number of panelists who are here today with us, like Dr. Rosenstein, and we also involved a number of people that are involved in the response to mental illness, such as the Department of Public Safety, Residential Education, and we also got outreach people who are off campus, such as the Diddy Hurst Suicide Prevention Center and the LA County Department of Mental Health, and of course Dr. Sachs. So thank you. And that was the first time that we got people to express in a town hall forum discussion topics of mental illness and to express their concerns about the resources available on the USC campus and off campus. And it was a huge success, and from there we're looking to coordinate with a number of other organizations to show that mental illness is very much a diverse issue.
Yeah, and with that, ultimately our goal is to bring about a culture change on campus where it is a more open environment to discuss mental health, and it's not just, it's a separate issue. It's part of, all student life. I mean, mental health is an everyday, it's an everyday topic. It should be part of student life in a more regular way. So hopefully with more open conversations with administration and students and more forums, more discussion, we can do something about the culture as well.
Right. We're actually going to be hosting another panel discussion at the end of March with the Academic Culture Assembly. So it will be a panel of 5 students from USC who will be talking about how they can reduce the stigma of mental illness by sharing their stories in an open environment. And we'll also be working with the Counseling Center. I was talking to Dr. Rosenstein earlier. So we'll be talking about our concerns and how we can improve and perfect the mental health resources we have for the students here on campus. We've also coordinated with a number of other departments, such as the Center for Women and Men. We actually put on a mental health workshop at the Women's Empowerment Conference. So we're trying to show that mental illness affects a diverse group of people, and it's very individualized. You can't put it in a box. And that's one of the goals of Free Minds, to show that mental illness truly is it's idiosyncratic in a way. What your story is your story. You can't just make stereotypes about it. So.
Great. Well, that's wonderful. And then our final group our final 2 speakers are from the Lived Experience Research Network, or LERN. Okay. And we have Timothy Kelly, who's a PhD candidate at the University of Iowa, and Becky Child, who's a PhD candidate at Portland State University.
So we're with the Lived Experience Research Network, it started as a part of a support group for graduate students, an online support group for graduate students called Users and Survivors in Academia. And our co-founders, Alicia Ostro, who's about to finish her PhD at Johns Hopkins, and Nev Jones, who's about to finish her PhD at DePaul University in Chicago, decided that this was a need, particularly for graduate students. There was kind of a lack of a specific kind of support community for graduate students. And from there, really, I think LEARN has become part of a broader strategy for change, really, in behavioral health practice, policy, and advocacy. And really, the core idea is that by bringing people who have lived experience of the mental health system, services, and various kinds of experiences that are often referred to as mental illnesses, that by bringing these folks into various disciplines that are working on these issues, there's something that can be learned from that experience that can be used in research. And so that's kind of the broad strategy. In a sense, I think we're organizing broadly. So it started with graduate students, and now we're trying to support undergraduate students, and Becky will talk about some of those programs. And then also organizing up as well, and trying to make linkages with faculty who have lived experience, So really just kind of across the campus community. In terms of some of the specific projects that we have going on, so the Users and Survivors in Academia is really cool because we're a bunch of graduate students, and so it's an opportunity to kind of collaborate on research projects and things like that. And so some of the projects that are being worked on, a national study of peer-run organizations, and also a toolkit for evaluation for peer-run respite programs. These are programs that are operated by people with lived experience in the behavioral health system as alternatives to psychiatric hospitalizations. I was just up in the Bay Area before I came here visiting a peer-run program there called Second Story. And so Laisha Ostra, who's the principal investigator on that project, what she's trying to do is develop tools that programs can use to do their own evaluation. And so in other words, determine what's working, maybe what's not working so well in those programs. And then there's also the Hearing Voices movement. So there's some research projects associated with that. That also is kind of an alternative practice that was developed in the United Kingdom, largely based on looking at the experience of things like voice hearing and in a community of support and exploring that. So there's some research projects focused on that. And then recently we partnered with Temple University on a project called the Young Investigators Data Set and Analysis Project. And what that is it's a project where more senior faculty members have access to large data sets. And what they're trying to do is build relationships with students, graduate students who have lived experience, to make those data sets available so we can do analysis on that to sort of explore other additional research questions and things like that. And then a project that was recently finished was the Promoting Engagement Practices in Peer Evaluation Research. What it really was is a paper that was funded by the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration to look at what is peer-led research, what's the value of that. And so those are some of the projects. In terms of some of these questions that were answered, these are great questions, and I think in terms of, I think for me, the way I think about this is, I don't think we're looking for an answer when it comes to how to create effective supports for students on campus, particularly when it comes to peer projects. I don't think we're looking for an answer. I think what we need is actually a lot of different options. And so, I thought, just a great example, Will and Adam, who were speaking to the experience of student veterans on campus in the earlier panel, kind of spoke to that need that, students who are veterans, have a very specific kind of an experience on campus. And maybe what we need is student organizations led by veterans to kind of, help support other veterans. And just like in law school, there's very specific experiences associated with the law school experience or medical school, or for us in clinical fields. So it's like what we need is a lot of different choices, I think, for students. So we're not looking for one single answer.
So the project I'm going to talk about is the discrimination in higher ed. What we noticed amongst ourselves on the user survivor listserv, people as students are having really difficult times because of statements that professors are making, disciplinary actions that take place that the students feel like are not justified, and because somebody was afraid of somebody having symptoms and things like that. And so we started looking, what researchers do is they go start looking at the literature. And there is some literature out there, but it's not a lot and it's not very robust. And so what we decided to do was to create a survey so that we could get people's experiences. Not that that's research, but that would guide us in developing some research a little later down the road. And some of the experiences people have had are just horrific. I can't even describe some of them because they're that horrific, and I just can't imagine being that person and having to deal with what some of the folks on our listserv and some of the people who've responded to the survey have experienced in school. It can be as simple as a professor telling somebody that people with schizophrenia can't function in society. That's a common one. So imagine that you're in a program where you're training to become a clinician. You're somebody who has a diagnosis of schizophrenia, and you're being told that you can't do this work. It really creates quite the conundrum for folks, and figuring out how to manage that and how to navigate through that. I know when I was doing my MSW work, I avoided any class that I could that had a mental health component to it, because I was quite sure I couldn't sit through the class without screaming or yelling at somebody. And so I went a very different track because I just knew I couldn't sit through it. There's a required class called Human Behavior in the Social Environment that discusses microtheories. And the experience I had in that class, which was as close as I could get to, I had to take that class. There was no other option. And they were talking about empowerment theory, and the professor misspoke. I had come in late to class. My butt hadn't touched my chair, and she misspoke, and out of my mouth, in the most horrendous tone possible, "It is not." I was so embarrassed, and she corrected herself, and then she misspoke a second time, basically saying the same thing she'd said the first time, and I just slapping my hand over my mouth so that I don't blurt out again. But some of the there's things like that are just really hard to deal with, and so having some place where that you can vent and talk about what happened, figure out some strategies to help manage it, because a lot of times there's not a lot of options for alternatives in either taking a different course or doing some other kind of equivalent study for it. Figuring out that you're not the only one who's had this kind of experience, that's really helpful to know too. So anyway, that's what got us started on the Discrimination in Higher Ed project. We also have a small project called LERN Turns, which is an intern project for undergraduate students, and we hope to eventually expand into high school for people that are interested in research and have lived experience. We are currently taking applications. It's a very small program, so there's not a lot of, we don't have a lot of resources for that, but that's one that we hope to grow as we get a little bit more funding and stability, and people with experience that can do the mentoring for folks who are interested in research. And then, as Timothy talked about, we have our listservs, which are the users and survivors in academia, which is geared towards graduate students, both master's level and doctoral level. And we have folks from all disciplines, or multiple disciplines in that area. It's really heavily focused in behavioral sciences because that's where a lot of us seem to gravitate to. But we are open to anyone, regardless of the discipline. We also have a listserv for bachelor level students because I think their challenges are a little different. And then we have one for postdocs as well. And I was mentioning earlier that we would love if that's something that people want to get involved with in terms of the veterans or the law students or the medical community. We would be very interested in doing some work there as well. So thank you.
Great. Well, thank you so much for participating. Before we get to the audience questions, I just had one sort of general question that's come up through sort of a consistent theme. So we are now sitting here on precisely the 25th anniversary of the web or the internet. I still don't know which one it is. I think it's the web. Is that right? Okay. So Becky, you talked about this user survivor listserv. Curie, you talked about sort of cross-campus communities. And Danny, you talked about a webcam monologue. And I'm interested in just hearing briefly from each of you, because we do want to get to audience questions, what role you think technology can play in terms of increasing the sort of connectedness of individuals with disabilities across academic communities, and perhaps decreasing the stigma that people feel. So we can just go along the line here.
Okay. I think.
Oh, remember to speak up.
Oh, okay, sorry. The way I was able to communicate with other students across campus is, well, for once, I did go to a conference in DC, and where we all gathered together and discussed how we were doing things at each of our campuses. But afterwards we were able to keep in touch with each other through Facebook, a lot of social media. Social media has been very helpful because so we kind of use Facebook as a platform where we could promote each of our events, support each other. Also, when we do fundraising, because you can, the internet allows us to express what we're trying to fundraise and kind of spread the link around. And when you have a link, you can spread it across a lot of people that you weren't even planning to reach. So in that sense, technology has been very useful in keeping in touch with people across the nation, just reaching a broad audience, and things like that.
So LEARN uses technology a lot because we are spread across the country. We have people in Chicago, Baltimore, Portland, Iowa City, and California, and so we have to use technology because it's just not feasible to do the kind of work that we do in isolation. And so technology is really important. That said, we still need improvements in technology as well, because we use Google Chats quite a bit, and when we try and get people on, we're still having difficulty being able to see everybody. And also, technology also helps for people who have other disabilities along with mental health conditions as well, because for people who are deaf or hard of hearing, being able to use a texting component it makes it easier if we don't have access to an interpreter. It's not the best in terms of an interpreter, but it does provide a way to connect to people differently.
Or normally when I think about technology, I usually think about just distractions, just texting and video games and whatnot. But then, for me, the Webcam Monologue is a productive way of using technology and harnessing it for a social purpose. So with me, I was able to tell my story in a way that I found particularly meaningful, and I can edit as I feel. And that's one thing that's useful with a Webcam Monologue. You can edit footage you don't find particularly useful, or you don't feel like sharing, whereas in a panel discussion like this, or with an in-person dialogue, you can't really edit out what you're saying. But I would go back and change what I said a number of times when I talk to people. But the Webcam Monologue is a way for people to share their stories and have complete control over what they want to share with the public. So far on our website, we have 2 Webcam Monologues, one from me and one from a friend from Canada. So technology, in essence, also connects people from different countries, different environments, different college campuses, and it's a way for people to see and hear each other's stories in the comfort of their own home or just wherever they like, and it's a way to get more stories out there. So our project is still ongoing, but hopefully more people through our stories we can get people more comfortable to share their own at some point.
Rick, did you?
Yeah. I think technology is amazing because it made the world so much smaller. Like I said before, I contact someone from all the way from New Jersey, and instead of contacting over the phone, I just called her over Google Hangouts. If I may make a recommendation, instead of GChat, you can use Google Hangouts, which allows the webcams and everything like that, so they can see the face-to-face.
Yeah.
And I've had conference calls in the past with numerous other peoples, and actually in the legal field, we have something called Law Lifeline, and which is a completely anonymous service where lawyers can call in at any time. I believe it's 24 hours, I'm not exactly sure, but they can call in, and this is for law school students. and they can call in and talk about what their issues are, and they can have someone just talk them through it. And as they become lawyers, the legal profession gives them access to the California Lawyers Assistance Program from here in California. And they, in turn, can talk to these people again, and they can talk about anything at all, any substance use issues, anything of the sorts. And it helps destigmatize everything, because while it's anonymous at first, people begin to realize that, you know, like what that person told me before, you're not alone, we're not alone. So technology is amazing, and technology has made things at least a little bit easier.
Great.
Okay, we have several questions here. Some were somewhat cryptic. I am just going to read the questions, and then, Adam, I'll let you get organized in terms of who will respond. The first, what advice would you give to a student who has a mental illness and who feels like the mental illness is affecting his or her grades, making them feel not qualified to apply to postgraduate programs? So feeling like because of my mental illness, I can't apply to graduate school. The second, do you believe that mental illness and an individual's ability to overcome it should be a source of pride? Should we be able to celebrate our illness as a fundamental part of our identity and embrace the cultural identity? The third question, oh goodness. Okay, now all of you are from very different academic settings. We've got law students, we've got PhD students, we've got undergraduate students. So, to what extent do you think law schools and other professional schools, like medical schools, have to be dehumanizing? Does this practice of dehumanization produce better professionals? Okay. Is it an initiation rite? Is it, quote, identification with the aggressor, end quote? That means I was treated badly as a student, so now it's my turn to abuse. I think, okay, can this be changed? Does it have to be changed? So I think for each of you to talk about your particular, and I see Rick is madly making notes on this one. So,
I have a horrible memory, so.
So I will, each of you could speak to your particular environment. Next question, have you or others you know who have used the arts or writing to communicate their experiences as a student with a mental illness? So the use of arts and writing to communicate their experiences. This question has to do with the idea, Timothy brought this up yesterday, of microaggressions by professors. And are there ways to help make professors safer professors by educating professors about the way the comments they make can be heard by students with mental illness? Yesterday there were comments, Michelle was talking about the difficulty of actually going to the counseling center. And the idea was, is there a way to bring the mental health professionals to the students rather than taking the students having to go to where the mental health professionals are, and the self-identification that goes with walking into a particular facility. So is there a way to bring the counselors to the students rather than the students always having to go to the counselors?
Okay, I guess let's try to keep our responses to under a minute so that we have some chance of getting to each one of these. So first, so applying to graduate schools with a mental illness, let's just go down the line. I don't know, Kira, you don't have much experience with this, but
yeah, I guess.
But maybe you can provide an undergraduate's perspective.
I guess for undergrads who might be, they feel like they're not getting good grades or they're not excelling at in academics. I feel like that's something you can always go to a counseling center and talk to the professional, and always I think there's nothing for students to lose by seeking help at the end of the day. So I think my advice would be to go to a counseling center and see a professional.
So I would say don't be deterred by having a mental health issue and applying to graduate school. You may be selective in the graduate school you apply to. For some people, like the MSW program at Portland State doesn't require you to take a GRE, so if you have really bad test anxiety and you want to go get an MSW, you might look for programs like Portland State's where you don't have to take the GRE. And don't think that you have to have a 4.0 to apply to graduate school. They look at a number of different things. I did not have a 4.0, and actually I think my undergraduate level were, I think I was at 2.78 when I applied to graduate school, so don't be discouraged if you don't have a perfect GPA. And
sorry, I don't mean to augment your anxiety. Let's,
yeah.
We're going to have to
okay.
go quickly here.
Yeah, so the idea that, you know, if you have a mental health condition, you've been socialized in the idea that means you can't be successful. That's called stereotype threat in the stigma literature. So, you know, we actually know something about that process. And so I think that would be the key thing that I would say. And then one other comment would just be that I tend to think about things the other way. So I think a lot of times people think the idea is you get well and then you go to school. Well, psychiatric rehabilitation is pretty clear. Actually, you go to school to get well.
Right.
So I don't think anyone should be denied or should think about, like, not think about going to grad school because they have a mental illness. Me personally, back in high school, I still haven't told my parents this, and they're actually here today. But my high school teacher told me that she described me as prone to be suicidal. And this was back in high school, and that almost made me change my perspective of going to undergrad, to law school, and everything like that. But once I got into undergrad, I realized that, you know, there are many other channels out there. You don't have to be the best student, you don't have to be the best speaker, you don't have to be the best anything. Find out what you really love and just do it. Don't let anyone else tell you otherwise. Because personally, like I said before, I was terrified of everything. And now here I am speaking in front of all of you and talk about my problems and opening up for, you know, for the first time for my parents. So.
Well, I'm going to be applying to medical school this summer, so I'm going to be facing this exact issue. But I've been talking to my therapist about this, and she said that telling your story is not necessarily a negative thing to do, especially if you talk about it the right way. Like for me, like it's more of a story of overcoming, and a story of passion, and a story of, it's a very human story, to put it the least, that we all struggle with various issues in our lives, and it's those struggles that make you who you are. For me, like when I think back to times when I was severely depressed, like when I look back on it, I don't think like it was necessarily a curse in a way. I think it more as a blessing. Now that I have a true passion that I have in my life, that I want to continue working on it. And I want to be able to share that with the graduate admissions officers, and I think they'll be able to appreciate my story, so we'll see.
Yeah, and again, I'm going to be applying as well, and I've had a lot of anxiety about my scores being good enough, and you know, people are even counselors are like, oh yeah, you have pretty slim chances, so it's very easy to get caught up in thinking that there's really only there's only one path to success and happiness. And I realized that I wish I'd explored more different alternatives of what I could do and what I'm interested in. And you know, this last year I've spent more time doing more research activities and more, you know, work with global medicine program that I'm in and Free Minds, and I'm realizing there's a lot more alternatives out there and I could be equally happy. So it's good not to get too pigeonholed.
Danny, I was hoping maybe you could respond quickly to the question about using arts and writing to communicate your experience to other students with mental illness.
Right. We actually have a number of poetry submissions on our website from people who have experienced mental illness, where they express it in a way that they feel most comfortable with. Well, like I took art classes, and I still do every now and then, so I usually paint really abstractly, and I feel that in a way is a form of therapy for me, to be able to express what I feel like in a form that I feel most comfortable doing.
And I don't know, Rick, maybe you can take a crack at this rite of passage issue, whether professional schools have to be dehumanizing or whether they can be more inclusive.
Sure. So things have actually changed quite a bit since the past 10 years. I've talked to my professors about this. And back in the day, where my professor used to go to schools like Berkeley and USC and all these other schools, it used to be very, very dehumanizing. People will see students crying out in the hallways because of how terrifying their first experience in law school is. And there's a common saying for law school, I'm pretty sure you've heard of this too. The first year, they scare the hell out of you. The second year, they work the hell out of you. And third year, they bore the hell out of you. Yeah. And so the first year is absolutely terrifying. And while I think it's kind of like a rite of passage, there are better ways of approaching this. I mean, there are many different ways, there's many different learning styles. And it doesn't apply to everyone else. It doesn't apply to everyone, excuse me. And professors are becoming more mindful of this, and actually law schools across the nation have started classes on mindfulness, on wellness, and other things to make sure that students are prepared. Schools have now the student affairs office and counseling offices just to make sure that students are okay.
Great. And Becky or Tim, could one of you respond to this question about whether mental illness and an individual's ability to overcome it should be a source of pride? Kira, you might be able to respond to this since you've done this this gratitude day. I mean, yeah, you can start.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, so to what extent does a person or how does a person go about incorporating the experience of mental health challenges into their identity? There's no one answer. Certainly, there's no one answer to that question. And people are going to vary in terms of how salient that feature of their experience is to them. And I think one option that I think that is under talked about, it's an awkward way to say that, but we don't talk about enough, is the possibility of actually, incorporating this is a potentially positive part of a person's identity. And I know for myself, that's been one key component to my own wellness and recovery journey.
I certainly think, whether it's mental illness or the struggles you have gone through, I certainly think that whether it's like mental illness or what you have gone through, it's definitely part of your identity, and it's important that you celebrate it because it's part of who you are. I actually saw a great example recently where one of the students who are involved with Active Minds, she designed a shirt where she artistically expressed different mental illnesses like depression and schizophrenia in the artistic format, and she was making T-shirts. So someone who had depression would wear a T-shirt that had a I wish I had the picture, but it was an artwork that people could wear to identify themselves as I've gone through this, and to celebrate.
So I hate to prioritize here, but Becky already talked a little bit about the Safe Professors issue, and I really do want to make sure that we get at least a minute to talk about how we bring mental health professionals to students. So just anybody who wants to talk about that, chime in. Carrie, you want to?
Yeah. Actually, I want to address to how to bring mental health professionals to students. Something I've done personally is because students always know there is a counseling center, but it's sometimes hard to just, get out of your chair and actually walk over there because it might be scary, or it's just something that's not something you do normally on a daily basis. So,
but that's more bringing students to the counselors. How do counselors get to students?
Oh, it's a counselor to students.
Yeah, like community outreach or...
I think if the counselors, if they engage themselves by attending like student events and just making, let them know like their face and name, then I think students would be, it would be more approachable and more opportunities.
Okay, Becky?
Yeah, I would say, at student events, in addition to orientation, but it's kind of like a drop. One of the things when I ran a drop-in center was that we had a nurse practitioner come to our drop-in center, because I know that a number of the people that came to our drop-in center, they don't make medical appointments. They don't keep them. So why do you keep making people make medical appointments when you know that they don't do that? So for students, bring the counselors to the different events, have them out in the, walking about, have them sponsor an event. There's different ways to do things like that.
All right. Well, I think that's all the time that we have, but thank you so much to our panelists for participating. Hopefully that gives some good ideas to the practitioners in the audience.
We had, there were several more questions that folks were asking. One question that I just want to put out there was the notion of what are the advantages and disadvantages of that you all see of starting your own student organization as opposed to becoming a part of a national organization? And how did you make that decision between we're going to start something of our own or we are going to be part of an already existing organization? Could you each just take a minute and just speak to that?
Well, that's kind of our experience. We want to actually grow and expand our idea to other schools, so other people would have to make that type of decision. But I think that what we were going after was something that we didn't see readily in our environment, and then keeping things on a small scale, sometimes it's beneficial to have the personalized approach. Like we start off by dealing with USC issues, and then maybe we'll see how that is at other colleges, but sometimes it might be effective to look in a very narrow mindset, I think.
So I guess the best way to describe this thing is how the American Bar Association and this sort of smaller city or bar association like OC, Los Angeles and things like that. On a national scale, it's harder to see what's going on at the individual person. So if you start a smaller organization that focuses on the personalization of reaching out to each and every single one of these people, I think that helps out so much more than what we can do on a larger national scale, because there's only so many people here. I'm in charge of this 9th Circuit, which is Southern California, Hawaii. I can't make sure of what's going on in every single law student's lives. I can find out about maybe 1 or 2 from each school, but that's it. So, yeah.
I think, I guess I just think in terms of positive youth development, right? So one of the things I think we want to try to be doing is creating leadership opportunities for people in particular contexts. And so, I think what that involves is many different organizations and student organizations. And I think the key is that their organizations should be really generated by students and for students.
I think one big advantage for me was because I know there's a national office, and I could, when I have troubles or I need more ideas, I could go back and look at the materials or see what other students have done. But at the same time, because each school is different, I think it's the student's job to be flexible, and when you program what you will actually do on your campus, to be open and just be kind of listen what your student population needs.
Thank you all very much. It's just been terrific. Before we have lunch, there is one more thing that we need to do, and I need Chris Schneiders to please come up here, and I need Mira Dalpe to please come up here. Now, both of you. This is something that the Sachs Institute has tried differently this year, and we did not want to have a conference in which we had keynote speakers individually up on a panel giving talks. We wanted to have groups of folks in conversation with one another. And this has worked out far better than any of us had imagined it would. But some of the folks, we just get to do the fun things. We get to get up and we get to call these wonderful people and talk to them on the phone and get to know them. The people who make this work are the folks at the USC staff. And I would like Chris Schneiders and Mira Dalpe to come up and to please just be recognized, because they're the ones who have made everything that you see.
And I just wanted to say, too, that they're incredible stars. They couldn't be more helpful and more resourceful, and I'm so lucky to have them in my office.
Just thank you for making all of this happen so well. You've just been terrific, and we really appreciate it. So, thank you very much. Time for lunch now.
Thanks, you guys did great.